First Health Center here, right up the road. It was a very informative meeting, and we've been working with them. They've been working with us. They've been very cooperative in trying to minimize the noise issue, particularly that's been affecting Village Acres. They've made changes. They've met with members of the community, and they hope to have it all wrapped up probably in about a couple of months. But most of it now is sort of the punch list items that they need to complete. And so we look forward for that. It was a very good meeting, and Mickey Foster and his senior staff met with us. Secondly, I guess it was Monday, I attended with some of my fellow council members the Neighborhood Advisory Committee meeting, and it was a good discussion. We heard from a variety of neighborhoods, and much of the discussion dealt with the issue of deer overpopulation. And we had a very good briefing from a member of the North Carolina Wildlife Department, named Rupert Medford. He did a very good job and answered a lot of questions of how this is handled throughout the state. Today, I attended the Tri-Cities meeting. It's representatives, the village manager, and our planning and zoning department head, along with our counterparts from Aberdeen and Southern Pines were there. And we basically spent almost all the meeting talking about that bill, SB 382, that was had included in it at the last minute something that is now law, that was going to restrict local government's ability to control land use and zoning decisions. And we were all in agreement that this was not good for us or any municipality. It would also restrict the counties from the same thing that they would be placing on us. And already various communities have taken action and with resolutions and so forth, and that's something we may get to. We're going to figure out the best way of approaching it. I did make a note that I noticed in the pilot the other day, there was a comment, I think it might have been his first comment, the new commissioner on the Moore County Board of Commissioners is Tom Adams, and I'll just quote because he was very good. He took issue with the law's existence and the legislative timeline. He drew attention to the tacked-on nature of the law, to what many have called an omnibus bill full of actions that did not pertain to the hurricane relief it was supposed to, which was the essence of the bill itself, was to provide a lot of funding to help with the hurricane victims in western North Carolina. Quote, "This is once again a situation in which the legislature, without a lot of consultation with counties or municipalities, has enacted something without substantial public hearing as part of a much larger bill. One thing we have to ask as we look at this is whether we want to encourage this type of activity on the part of the legislature or not. I would prefer to see them go back and repeal it and take this idea through regular order." So that was a good comment from the new commissioner, Tom Adams. One other thing, last week I attended the Sand Hills Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting, and a good part of the meeting dealt with the issue of, was raised by the representatives from Aberdeen, the issue of these fatalities that have been taking place along 211 and that area of Aberdeen where there's a lot of road construction going on. They've had, I think it was literally, they mentioned 3 fatalities in the last several months. And so there's a lot of concern raised. I obviously expressed same amount of concern anytime there's a traffic fatality. And we strongly encourage the NCDOT to look at this situation and see what type of corrective action can be taken, because these road construction projects are not completed over a weekend. This is going to go on for a year and a half, maybe 2. So you should know that was a discussion matter. And the last thing, every now and then someone sends me, or I happen to read, a comment on Nextdoor. And so I wanted to read a favorable comment that reflected on the village of Pinehurst. I know many of us sometimes get frustrated with our local government services. However, I want to thank our local government officials and offices for keeping us informed on the recent inclement weather. Today, we received text messages and notice from Code Red, the mobile app. If you do not have this app on your cell phone, we encourage you to do that now. It is free. Thank you, Pinehurst and Moore County, for looking out for our safety. So I'm a gentleman who lives in number 7, Jim Artman. So I too want to compliment our communications team and the overall village staff for our response to that snow, which caused some problems, but I think we can be proud of how we handled it in Pinehurst. Thank you. That concludes my comments. I'll ask Dr. Morgan.
Here's a couple things. Thank you. Had a meeting last Wednesday with CPRC, and not a whole lot of it pertained to us. One factor was they did describe that we've got a new administration, both in the state government and also in the federal government, and they're basically trying to make sure that they get all the ground rules for the changes. Got an email today from Lee Worsley, who's in charge of the CPRC, and the Office of Management Budget at the federal level has frozen all grants. And the CPRC, they're effectively a pass-through for the 7 different counties that it serves. And they have millions and millions of dollars that pass through in various grants, that kind of stuff. So those have all been frozen. They're working with that and trying to make sure whatever programs they have or how they're going to react with it. This should not affect Pinehurst. And we do get some money for the MPO, but other than that, we do not have any grants here. So as you see about the grants being frozen, that should not affect us in any part of our government. Attended a luncheon today for Friend to Friend, and it was a magnificent luncheon. They had over 400 people. It's their main fundraising event that they have every year, and it's continued to grow. They had it at the Fair Barn, so it's the biggest one they've ever had. Hopefully their donations will also show that. Of note, there were 13 members of the State Bureau of Investigation who focus on internet crimes against children. So they're the state task force that puts pedophiles in jail. In talking with them, did find out that, and it's already executed now, so I guess I can mention here, but they then teamed up, as they usually do, to execute a search warrant in the western part of our county. I won't get into any more details on that, but I bring that up because we do live in a wonderful place, and lots of times we think stuff like that doesn't exist around us, but it does, okay? And so human trafficking is a big issue, and if you see something, say something with it. The mission of Friend to Friend is to help survivors of domestic abuse, sexual assault, and human trafficking. And it's a non-governmental organization, and it's focused entirely on Moore County. Just to throw that out there for the great work they do, thank you to Friend, and they had a great event. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that. I did notice the large traffic outside on 5 going into the Fair Barn. I was wondering, what event am I forgetting about?
They had 440 people sign up. A magnificent number.
Great news. Councilman Taylor.
A couple of things also. I attended earlier this month, the Technical Coordinating Committee for the SMPO. They continue to work on some things which on one hand are largely technical and administrative, but they are getting around to actually beginning the work that will result in a comprehensive transportation plan for the towns involved in the SMPO. I also attended the second of 3 meetings at the airport who are considering possible design changes or renovations to the terminal there. This is not in connection with the possibility that one day in the future we may have commercial service. They're looking at how to enhance what is there today for people, not just when we have big events like a U.S. Open, but on a day-to-day basis. There are a surprising number of flights that go in and out of there for a host of reasons, both serving small businesses and just individuals coming to the resort or what have you, coming to the area. attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting. I think, Pat, I would add one word of clarification to the extent that the audience listening to this is different. You have read in the paper and may read going forward additional comments on the efforts for deer remediation. I just think we should emphasize that the village government is not mandating any of this. They have had a program at the state level which they're making available. It can be implemented in neighborhoods. It could theoretically be implemented by a single resident, but we are not mandating anything there. So if you're having a problem with deer, it's contact your neighborhood advisory council meeting or one of us, and we can talk about that. I was also, I have to say, impressed by the scale of what we toured today at the hospital. The ability for them to continue operations 24/7 in the absence of power from an outside source was really impressive. And equally impressive what they had been dealing with in the past, what they are replacing, and are within hopefully a few weeks of completing that. So kudos to them for putting the funds together to ensure that those services continue no matter what else is going on outside. That's it for me.
Thank you. Councilman Ficklin.
Thank you. Yes, kudos from me as well to First Health for an incredible tour of the energy plant. I would add one thing to the NAC conversation that we had yesterday, which was very informative, lots of questions, lots of answers from Rupert Medford. Be sure, if you have questions, to contact your NAC representative. And don't forget also that we have living in deer country as a topic on our Hot Topics feature on the website. That's it.
Thank you for reminding us there. Councilman Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting a week or so ago, and I was very encouraged. They have 4 new members on the committee, and they reviewed the planned projects going forward from our village manager and took a look at those. They also selected a new chairperson, Kyle Covino, and I'm particularly enthused with the positive outlook that has been expressed by the members of the committee, and I think they're very interested in contributing to the extent they can and being possibly involved in any intermodal transportation plan project should that arise in the future. So it's a very encouraging sign. I think they want to get involved, which is very encouraging. I also attended the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, and I would second that we have to be careful to make sure that the community understands that this is not a village program, that this is a program that's run by the North Carolina Wildlife Commission. So that's important. Along with the rest of the council, I was at First Health this morning, and I appreciate the tour. Very impressive emergency power facility that they're going to put in place. We also received an overview on the size and scope of the medical services that they provide in the community, and I think that was extremely important, as well as a kind of an understanding on the status of rural medical facilities across the country. And I can tell you that we are certainly blessed to have within our community a First Health. So it's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
you mentioned, well, there were several mentions of the NAC meeting yesterday. One thing that came up that I wanted to talk about is the intersection at Spring Lake Road and 15501. The synchronization of that has been off, according to some people. So DOT was actually aware of it already and is looking into it. But also some of the other intersections along 15501, they were concerned about the synchronization of the lights. So they are looking into that as well.
Thank you. Yes, that did come up, and you have the answer. Okay, let's go on to item 4. That's the motion to approve the consent agenda. All the items listed below are considered routine or have been discussed at length in previous meetings and will be enacted by one motion. No separate discussion will be held unless requested by a member of the village council. So there are 3 items dealing with the village council meeting minutes. 1 is the January 14th special meeting minutes. 2 is the January 14th regular meeting minutes. And the 3rd item is the January 14th work session minutes. Any comments?
Just a question. I obviously, unfortunately, had to miss that meeting. I apologize for that, but it was unavoidable. Am I allowed even to vote on this? I have reviewed the video of both of the meetings and the minutes, and I have no comments on the minutes, but
Parliamentary issue?
Yeah, I don't think you're allowed if you weren't in attendance.
I think that's correct.
Okay. All right. Okay, we've eliminated one. Having heard that comment, any other comments or motions?
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's adopted 4-0 with one abstention. That's the end of the consent agenda. Now we're going to come up to the public comments period. And as I mentioned earlier, I know there are some people here who wanted to discuss the proposal regarding McIntyre and Kelly Road. You are certainly welcome to come up and discuss that. And I don't know, anybody in the council wants to breach the topic since it was on the agenda until just very recently. But before we get to that, I'm going to ask if Lou Mora is here from Jupiter Creek Boulevard. Would you like to come up and speak on your topic?
My name is Lou Maurer. I live at 71 Juniper Creek Boulevard. And I'd like to speak on the topic of the proposed sidewalk. I was here in this chamber in February of 2023 when this was presented to us by the assistant city manager, who is now the city manager. This was a very flawed proposal from the get-go, and it hasn't gotten any better. The manager has employed an engineering firm to figure out how to build this sidewalk. And after 18 months and many thousands of dollars, they have finally come up with their final report, their final description of how to build this out. It is equally inept. I'm an engineer, and I can tell you this thing will be, it'll be awful. I moved here because I fell in love with the beauty of Juniper Creek Boulevard. I live right on that street. And this project will destroy forever what I have come to love about Juniper Creek Boulevard. How can I say this? Well, I'm an engineer, and I've looked at this latest engineer's report, which was furnished to me by Mr. Willardson. I only have 3 minutes, so perhaps the first thing I should say is that I love this community. I love being here. I came here to get away from the big city and all the concrete and all the stuff that goes on with overreach in government and all of that. That said, there are serious issues in this latest engineer's report that need to be addressed by someone who understands what it means. And what it means is the beauty of that road, which is one of the nicest in all of Pinehurst, will be lost forever. For what? And for how much? When I speak about cost, I'm not talking just about the cost of the construction, which, by the way, instead of $400,000, which Mr. Willardson said it was going to cost, is going to be well over $1 million. Well over $1 million. And who's going to pay that? But that's just the dollar cost. What about the cost of all those beautiful trees that are going to get ripped up and replaced by a strip of concrete? And this strip of concrete will not be like it's supposed to be in the city code. The city code says that there's supposed to be this buffer zone between the road and the sidewalk. This is what people who walk on sidewalk want. They don't want to walk right next to the road. Well, in fact, this engineer's report points out that this buffer zone will be completely omitted. This new sidewalk is going to be pushed right up next to the road. Well, guess what? You folks that want to walk your dogs, you want to walk them right next to the road? That's absolutely absurd. Anybody that walks their dogs, as I do on Juniper Creek Boulevard, wants to walk as far from the road as you can with your dog. All right? That's just one issue. There are some serious engineering mistakes made in this report as well that are going to drive up the cost of this thing beyond anything anybody ever imagined. And it's going to be ugly. Ugly. For example, when you pull into number 6 from 15501, that is a beautiful entrance to any kind of a community. Everybody here should be very proud of that. But this will, even in the engineer's report doesn't do it justice, but this will destroy that look. Imagine a ramp because of the elevation of that property. Imagine a ramp and a safety railing going down there. Yeah, it's going to be an eyesore. In short, I only have 3 minutes. It's an ugly project. This council deserves to take a hard look at the reality of what this sidewalk means if it goes forward. I don't know where the money's going to come up for, but that's not my issue. My issue is the true cost, which is the beauty of Juniper Creek Boulevard, which is going to be lost forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou, for your comments and for paying attention to the clock on that topic. Okay, let us go to the, if there's anybody else who has any comments they'd like to make about any topic, even though they haven't signed up, they are welcome to come up to the microphone now and make a statement. So please do if you have an interest. Okay, just state your name and be fine.
Hi, I'm Valerie Mead, and I live on 100 Kelly Road. And as soon as I biked over here from work, I learned that our mission, because of the building that was going to go on between McIntyre and Kelly, the developer pulled back and pulled out or canceled. I can't say that I'm not happy. I'm actually thrilled. You know, we were all pumped up to plead with the council about the building of these 2 large buildings, the back and the sides facing the street. There was just going to be an inner parking lot with inadequate parking for these large buildings. It was kind of reminding us of the Trenton prison in New Jersey. There was a sidewalk also. It led to nowhere. It started at the corner and just ended just kind of in the middle. The entrance and exit onto Kelly would require large trucks to enter, but could only back out because there was not enough space to turn around. But all that said, maybe the developer realized that it just didn't make sense. None of this made sense. We're a quiet neighborhood. We love our neighborhood. We understand that this lot will probably be built on eventually. It is mixed use, commercial, residential. But that being said, something more to scale, something prettier, something that didn't allow a strip mall basically being built because they were asking for retail spaces. They never said what type of retail spaces and apartments. They couldn't tell us how many apartments. So there was a lot of upset about it, and we're kind of thrilled that they pulled out, to be honest with you. And so we don't have to stand up here and beg that you guys don't approve it. So, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mead, for your thoughtful comments. Any other individuals who'd like to speak? Hearing none. Is the only thing I'd like to comment on is I actually had attended both of the Planning and Zoning Board meetings where this topic was discussed. And so I heard firsthand the proposals, and I also heard from many residents who spoke or who sent emails, some to myself and some to myself and all my colleagues. I guess where it stands now is there's no longer an application pending before this council, so we have nothing any further to do here. The Planning and Zoning Board exercised their authority and voted, I think it was 4-1, to reject the proposal. So that, there can be future proposals, and we'll just have to wait and see. But if there are, there'll be a notice about that to residents in the area once again, and people will be encouraged to voice their opinions. So I thank those residents who had provided us with input, because citizen input is important when we're making decisions like this. We know that the smallest development can have an impact on a neighborhood, and we have some guidelines and some items in our PDO that lay out some pretty clear parameters, and I think, I know I would like to see us protect and preserve Pinehurst, not to stop development, but just to see that resident input is welcome, and it helps guide us, and so do the rules that we have laid out for all developers. So having said that, I'll ask if any of my colleagues have any other thoughts they'd like to convey, or we'll move on. Any thoughts? No? No?
And I did receive a question as to whether this proposal could be reintroduced at a later time. My impression was that there is actually a window for appeal to P&Z decisions.
Well, we'll need clarification on that, but my understanding is that it has been completely withdrawn.
So there is no application pending before us,
Correct.
and it was rejected by the Planning and Zoning Board. So maybe, Alex, you can answer that. One big question, I guess, is they can certainly submit another application with something else, but the current one that's been bouncing around, what is the sort of status of it?
Sure. So it depends on which type of application they would submit. So the property does have a current zoning designation in place, it's neighborhood commercial. The Pinehurst Development Ordinance lays out what options there are for someone to develop following all those standards. Based on the size of that lot, if someone wanted to propose what is called a by right proposal, which means you follow the existing zoning classification and those adopted standards, that would be a minor site plan review, which is delegated to the administrative staff. No public hearings would be required. So no public notification of the decision or the review of that proposal. Now, the property is also located within the Historic Preservation Overlay District, which requires a public hearing and a evidentiary public hearing to be held by the Historic Preservation Commission, which would require a public notice. However, the only considerations that the Historic Preservation Commission can consider in those public hearings are matters of fact on the application as it pertains to adopted design standards, so not any public opinion on the proposal. Now, if a property owner wanted to submit an application to amend the zoning again, the Pinehurst Development Ordinance does require now that a notice before Village Council has been prepared and the application has been withdrawn or turned down. There's a waiting period of a full calendar year, 365 days. Village Council can waive that period if they chose to do so. And if that proposal or such an application were to be made, it would follow the same public hearing notice and procedures that this application has gone through to date.
The first item you mentioned, the possibility of them submitting something that doesn't have to go through P and Z, but would go through HPC, they would have to be in conformance with our PDO, though, is that correct?
Absolutely,
Okay, so that still is the governing document.
it would be.
Okay.
And it would still undergo staff review prior to going to HPC.
It would be in conjunction with that HPC review. Yes, a full site plan approval could not be granted without the final HPC review and approval as well.
Other questions is, okay. Well, that's very helpful, and we'll just wait and see. Okay. Okay.
Hang around.
Now we're going to go on to item 7. This is dealing with ordinance, consider ordinance 25-01 zoning map amendment.
I think I'd like to move to enter public hearing number 2.
I'm sorry, we got a public hearing number 2 we got to go to. Okay, we just did that. So the public hearing for number 2 for major site plan review. This has to deal with the First Health application. Go ahead, Jack.
I move to recess the regular meeting and enter into public hearing number 2.
Okay. Second. We have a motion and a second. Okay. Go ahead, Alex.
Aye.
Now.
All right, thank you. So again, public hearing number 2 is the subject applicant, and description is First Health of the Carolinas demolition and new surface parking. This public hearing is to consider again a request, thank you Mayor, for a major site plan review, and it would be for the demolition of an existing specialty clinic on the property and adding 201 additional parking spaces on the First Health Hospital campus. Officially, the property is identified as Moore County parcel ID number 000234475, and the current address is 155 Memorial Drive, so it's at the corner of Page and Memorial. And again, the applicant is First Health of the Carolinas. A little bit about major site plans. Major site plans, by definition in the PDO, are those which are non-residential development or multifamily development that exceeds a total area of disturbance of 2 acres or more. It does also, the PDO that is, prescribe the process and requirements, similar to the discussion we were just having for major site plan reviews and approval. The major distinction between major site plans and minor site plans, aside from the area of disturbance, is that major site plans do require a public hearing and review and recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Board, which is forwarded to Village Council, which Village Council, as we are tonight, holds a public hearing, and you consider the request and review what is deemed a general concept plan. And if you approve a general concept plan based on those adopted standards, it then authorizes an applicant to pursue final site plan approval through review of the Technical Review Committee, or the TRC. Before we get to that stage, through the review of a major site plan application, the Technical Review Committee does review for general compliance, and the term general is used because there are just general requirements based on Appendix C of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance for a general concept plan. So that is reviewed for compliance with adopted standards and requirements, and then the staff forwards a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Board as well as Council based on that consensus of the technical review. The type of decision, this is very important. Again, I kind of talked a little bit about a couple of different decision types. A major site plan review is an administrative decision. Administrative decisions are those which are classified or based on adopted objective development standards. They're, as the name implies, they are typically performed by the administrative professional staff, and public hearings are typically not required. However, again, we are here with the public hearing because of the threshold and the requirements in our development ordinance. With administrative decision, if the standards are met, an approval must be granted. Any revisions that are recommended by the Village Council or changes must be based on any consistency with those adopted standards. And again, the big distinction is that it is not a legislative or quasi-judicial decision, which both do require public hearings. The standards of review, again, they are dictated by the standards in the Pinehurst Development Ordinance as well as the village's engineering standards and specifications manual, and any other applicable state and local regulations such as building or fire code. Again, Appendix C is a checklist that guides applicants for what is required for a major site plan application. And again, that general concept plan, as the name implies, is just to convey the proposed project's general compliance with the standards. It is not intended to be a fully detailed or engineered plan. And any supplemental documents that are required as part of the review are reviewed by the Technical Review Committee prior to and then after council approval for a full site plan review. Just a little visual of what that process would look like mapped out. You have the application, it's submitted, it's distributed to review to the Technical Review Committee. Comments are made which would require revisions to the plans, and this process continues until compliance is determined. And then the public hearings before the Planning and Zoning Board and then ultimately Village Council are held. If approval by Village Council, then the full detailed engineer plans can be submitted and reviewed, and if approval granted, work can begin. So you see the blue rectangle there is where we are in this process. So there's been quite a bit of movement and work before getting to this evening. Now more on the specifics of the request at hand. Again, a lot of work's kind of come in before this evening, kind of began with an official submittal in March of last year. The final submittal, which was deemed to be fully compliant, was in November of last year. And the TRC believes everything has now been, has been satisfied, and again, pending approval by Village Council, the applicant then proceed to site plan review by the Technical Review Committee. So there's an existing plus or minus 80,000 square foot specialty clinic building that is to be demolished and adding additional surface parking. Currently the site, you guys were near the area today, has 245 existing spaces and will be expanded to 446, 13 of which are now shown or indicated to be compliant with ADA standards. The totality of that subject property, a little history there, was kind of created through a recombination in July of 2007 where there were several out parcels and again all constituted the Morehealth Regional Hospital campus. You have the dimensions there for street frontage on both Page Road and Memorial Drive. There are 2 zoning designations on the subject property. The area there, mainly where the existing clinic is situated, is in the OP, Office and Professional District, whereas further more interior toward the Reed Hart Center area, where most of the surface parking, or a lot of the surface parking will go, is zoned HD for hospital development. The new lot will be, again, supporting all the facilities across the campus and therefore is not a principal use, but accessory to the overall campus. There are 3 connections that are to be shown, so some of the connections and access points there will be redesigned a little bit. The applicant has provided a traffic memorandum. This is not intended to be a full traffic impact analysis. And that memorandum, which was included in the agenda packet, shows since there is no new facility space to be generated or included with this proposal, no additional trips are expected to be accessing or leaving the hospital campus. Traffic patterns, of course, would change slightly due to some of that reorientation of the access and for the additional parking there. The total overall project would actually include a reduction in impervious surface, although a slight one, but still a reduction. And the Office and Professional and the hospital zoning districts allow for an up to 70%. So you see they're still well under that threshold. There are no environmental concerns, although the property is located within a high-quality watershed. Since most of the development existed prior to the enaction of those regulations in June of 1993, that existing development is excluded from having to meet the watershed protection criteria. And as the site plan review were to move forward, because the area of disturbance exceeds 1 acre, a sedimentation and erosion control plan will need to be submitted and approved by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. Got a visual here on the map. The map on the right, you can kind of see the outline in the blue area. The main campus moving northeast, you're getting closer to, in the pink shaded area where Memorial Drive is, that is the footprint of that existing clinic to be demolished and that Office and Professional zoning district. Most of the area is surrounded and to the north and to the east of other medical services and clinics in the area along Page Road. And then in the western and northwestern portion, the area of Village Acres neighborhood, and then across 211, more residential area and Sacred Heart Catholic Church. All right, so next few slides just have an image of the general concept plan. This indicates sort of the existing conditions as well as the demolition plan. All the area outlined is area to be considered as part of this proposal, so you can see the area adding up to the threshold of over 2 acres. All right, so here's the sort of the overall layout. The specialty clinic is removed, and you see the additional parking spaces provided there along Memorial Drive. And it's just a drainage plan which shows where the collection and the drainage of stormwater runoff will be directed. Here we go. A general depiction of the required landscaping that will ultimately be required around the perimeter of the new parking areas as well as the interior. Again, full detailed plans will be submitted after general concept plan approval by Village Council, where the applicant would have to satisfy that the total number of trees, both pine, understory, and as well as additional shrubs will be met. So the Planning and Zoning Board, they held their required public hearing and reviewed the request during the regular meeting on January 2nd, and the Planning and Zoning Board unanimously recommended approval of the request to Village Council. And Village Council action and options, of course, we're here in the duly advertised public hearing. You review the proposal, the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Board, as well as the Technical Review Committee and village staff. And you have the ability to approve the request by simple motion. You have the ability to approve the request with any additional conditions or revisions, which shall only be based on conformance with an adopted standard. Or you have the ability to reject a site plan after hold of the hearing. However, those reasons must be related to out of conformance with an adopted standard, and the reasons for which must be stated on the record. And I don't think this is necessary, but just for everyone's education, that in the future, if the Village Council were to delay action on a general concept plan 90 days after being placed on an agenda, the recommendation, whatever that was, from the Planning and Zoning Board shall be deemed approval of the general concept plan. And then to conclude with the staff recommendation, again, through the staff technical review, we've reviewed the documents in the proposal to be in compliance with the adopted standards. And as this is administrative review, as standards have been met, approval must be granted. Staff recommends Village Council approve the general concept plan and material as submitted. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. We're in a public hearing right now. Well, let's first see if any questions from the council for you, Alex. Start, Dr. Morgan, start with you.
I think this is very straightforward. I've got no questions. Been through the plan. Looks good to me.
Alex, I think we heard today that the primary purpose of this is employee parking. Is that correct?
I would let the applicant speak to that, but obviously, I mean, I've had to circle the lot a few times for myself, so I imagine that however they would intend to serve, it will be 200 additional spaces plus that they're going to benefit from it one way or the other.
Any thoughts? Jack?
I have no questions. I'd just like to point out something I think I've mentioned a number of times before, is that this is an administrative decision, and as long as it meets all the standards, which it does, there is no doubt this should and would be approved. So someone might say, this is all theater, and why do we go through this process? I think we deliberately put in our planning, our development ordinance for major site plans, even though they may be administrative decisions, that they receive transparency from the point of view of having both a planning and zoning board and a council public hearing, so that the community knows exactly what's happening when some large equipment shows up across the street from them. They'll know exactly what's going on. So it's very important for transparency point of view that we hold these public hearings.
Go ahead, Doug.
I would just allow the applicants to say anything if they'd like.
Okay. Please come up to the
And
table
it's not necessary.
if you'd like to. Okay.
Well, thank you first for allowing us to present our project to you, and certainly appreciated all of you coming out this morning to actually walk the Central Energy Plant and see where our future project is that we're presenting you tonight. Alex did such a great job tonight presenting that I don't have a whole lot to offer, other than the fact to reiterate the fact that this parking is critical to our campus, because we are strapped with parking today. Any patient or visitor coming to our campus today usually experiences, several minutes of roaming around looking for a parking space that's close to a exit or an entrance point to our hospital. And many times they are directed over to a parking garage or to another parking lot that is a long distance walk for them. And some of our patients, can't make that walk. They're maybe not as ambulatory as some of us, and I can relate to that because I'm experiencing some ambulatory problems myself. So I will look for closer parking in and around the hospital when I can. So the idea of this is to allow more parking, adjacent to the hospital, so that our visitors and our patients, have direct access into the hospital, and push more of our staff members out into this parking lot. So we think this will be a great addition to our campus. Certainly, we're looking forward to taking down a very old, tired building that is costing us a lot of money to maintain. So with that being said, we appreciate the, the consideration of this project in front of you, and happy to answer any questions.
I just have two questions. One, how long do you expect this project to be before it's completed?
Our plan is to have this done before the end of the year.
Okay. All right. And the next question I ask, it's sort of tongue-in-cheek a little, but it's certainly a Pinehurst-centric question. Is there any spots for golf cart parking?
That is a very good question, but I think if a golf cart presented itself, they could park in a regular parking spot. We're not going to restrict that. But that, we never actually considered that, but I think they would just park in a normal spot.
Okay. I'm thinking more of visitors rather than patients
Yeah.
themselves, but yeah, okay. All right. Others, no, I think we were,
I'll just make one other comment, is that, and we heard this again today, I presented this a few months back, while they have multiple campuses for First Health, 51% of the patients that are involved with First Health are coming from outside Moore County. So there's a lot of driving, there's a lot of people parking, that kind of stuff.
well, no other questions? Thank you.
I move to approve the proposed major site plan for First Health of the Carolinas Incorporated.
We need to close the
Close the
public
hearing.
hearing, sorry.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That's a good reminder. Are there any public comments regarding this proposal from First Health and its parking spots? Nothing. Okay, there we go. We've done that. Now we can,
I move to recess the regular meeting and enter into public hearing number 2. We just did that. Now I move to recess the public hearing number 2 and go back into the regular meeting.
okay, all those in
Second.
favor, and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're done there. Okay. Now, where is the motion?
I think now I'm allowed to do that one. So I move to approve the proposed major site plan for First Health of the Carolinas Incorporated, located at 155 Memorial Drive, Moore County, PID number 000234475.
You have a motion?
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're done. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
By point of order, Mr. Mayor, I know we withdrew item 6A. We did not withdraw item 7A. I don't think it's a big deal, but do we need to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, withdrawing the ordinance,
Consider the
7A
ordinance rather than the hearing.
well, since it was withdrawn,
Maybe academic.
yeah. There was no ordinance, actually. We just ended our public hearing on it, which really wasn't a public hearing even. Okay. All right, we are back to regular business. This is the biannual public safety reports for fiscal year 2025. We begin with the fire department. Chief, please.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hope everybody's doing well. Glad to be here tonight. So just staying with the same format that we've had previously, just be and willing to answer any questions. So starting from left to right in the top left-hand box, so halfway through the year, our calls for service are 1,234. Overlapping incidents, those are continuing to increase. If you remember our last report, they were around 24%. Now we're up to 29%. That's a trend that we're going to continue to see. So basically,
Point to me where you, what number you're pointing at.
right here. So
On
if you
the
look
left.
top left-hand side, Mayor.
Gotcha.
You look down at overlapping incidents at 29.10%.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And then busiest day of the week is Thursday for us. Busiest hour of the day is 4 p.m. And then staff have been recalled 6 times. So just as a note, recalls is when we have incident that requires an extended period of time where we got resources tied up on the scene. We recall off-duty staff in to backfill, make sure we have resources available to take care of additional incidents. Moving over to the middle box, percent of calls for service. Fire is 3%. Rescue and EMS continues to be our leader. 40% of the calls that we answer are rescue and EMS calls. Overpressure ruptures, those are hazardous materials calls, containers, things of that nature that we have. Hazardous conditions, 4%. Service calls are 17%. Good intent calls are 14%. False alarm, false calls are 19%. And then severe weather and natural disasters is 2%. Moving over, calls of service per day. So basically that last box on the top right-hand side. So 0 is midnight and going to your right. So you can see that from about between 7 a.m. and probably around 8 o'clock is where we typically see our highest call volume, which is still, that's pretty much normal for what we have been seeing in the past. Very interesting, moving down there to the bottom left. If you look down to the bottom left, the 10-year, mid-year comparison. So we're still seeing that increase that we're seeing in call volume. From 24 to 25, it's not much, but what we're seeing is year over, our calls were pretty much ahead of schedule in terms of the number of calls that we're seeing calls for service. So those numbers are still concerning in terms of the call volume.
Does that say it's flat for the last 3 years?
Yeah, so if you look at 24 and 25, but I think what we're going to see at the end of the year, the annual report, I think you're going to see an increase this year. So that's what right now it is flat at this time of year, but I think what we're seeing at the pace that we're at right now, since this has been done, we're going to see an increase. So we're going to keep a close eye on that, sir. Location calls to service. So 73% of our calls are still within the village, of course. 12% is district. So if you remember, we have a county district that we serve, and also we have the Taylortown area that we serve as well. And then providing assistance to our other departments, so running outside of the village, so providing assistance to Aberdeen, Southern Pines, our neighbors, which they also reciprocate that to us, is about 15% of our calls. State mandated inspections, we're at 52. And then plan reviews, so plan reviews, that's a lot of the projects that we're working on, new projects, things of that nature. We actually work with Alex and inspections group to make sure those plans are up to date and up to code and before they get started. We're at 109 days since our last lost time injury, and then public awareness contacts, we're at 23,000 of those. So be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Got a couple of small ones.
Yes, sir.
The false alarm and false call at 19%, which is the second largest percentage of calls. What can we do to reduce that? Because that's residents making a false.
Well, it's not necessarily all
alarm.
residential. It's not all residential. So those, once again, when you look at those calls, those are going to be your fire alarms, your automatic fire alarms. And so a lot of times those alarm systems, they're required to be maintained every year. So we keep a very close eye on that. So within the fire code, there's a requirement that those systems have to be maintained annually. So we are very vigilant on that with our commercial occupancies. So we can enforce fire code on those commercials. So we make sure that those systems are being maintained, so that we help cut down on that number. In terms of residential alarms, there's not a whole lot we can do in terms of making them maintain their alarms. But the other thing to think about on those false alarms or those alarms is there are what's not typically captured in that number that you got to think about is a lot of times those alarms prevent a larger incident. So, you know, that's also pieced in there. One thing, you know, in some communities, what they do, you have to be very careful with this strategy. I would caution against, you know, we would really need to look at it if we done it, is what they call a nuisance ordinance. So if you have an incident or if you have an address that you run repeated calls to, and typically there's a number within X number of alarms within X amount of period of time, you know, you could be charged for a nuisance response. Those are kind of a double-edged sword. It causes, you know, it helps fix one thing on one end, but it causes a whole nother issue on the other end. So it goes back to, is the juice worth the squeeze? That's really what you got to ask yourself on that. But, you know, we educate as much as we can, Mayor, to make sure that we keep those numbers down. One thing I think that's really important when you think about that is if you look at the amount of commercial development we've had with the number of these systems that we have in Pinehurst, that's still a pretty low number when you compare what we actually have present in terms of the systems we have. I'd much rather have the notification that there's a problem than people taking those systems offline or not having them, period.
Okay. Let me, in FY 2024, the total number of plan reviews, compliance, consultations, re-inspections were 1,115. At mid-year now, we're at 189. Is there some reason there's that huge distinction, or do we do most of these reviews in the second half of the year?
That's kind of a, when you look at that, that's an ebb and flow kind of thing, Mayor. So right now, what you got to look at is we had a slow a little bit in terms of new projects. So when you look at the number of plan reviews we have, there's kind of that, you know, it'll probably ramp back up coming into the springtime. So I'll give you an example. There's a lot of projects that we have that are getting ready to kick off that we haven't done plan reviews yet. So you take Sandstone, for example. There'll probably be 4 to 5 additional plan reviews that we have to do on Sandstone. So those numbers will start to tick back up. But you know, the plan reviews are all going to be based off of what we're doing with new construction, okay? That's what drives the plan review process, is new construction. When you look at compliance, the assistant fire marshal that we had full-time, he decided to make a career move. He went back to shift, and so we had about a 3-month time span, almost a 3-month time span there where that position was vacant. Now, we had our part-time inspector that we were going out and maintaining the inspection, so that is a little bit of a dip right there. From that, but we were still maintaining our state-mandated inspections.
Chief, sorry to interrupt, but
yes,
would
sir.
some of that also be due to the U.S. Open tents and someone having to review those?
Right, and that was going to be, that was the other point is, you got to remember there was, when you look at that, we were doing 69 inspections a day out there at the U.S. Open for 7 days, so that was the other piece of that large number as well.
Well, we can look at that. Last thing is just,
Right.
Last year, your busiest day of the week was Friday, and now it's Thursday. You got any insight into that?
Friday instead of Thursday?
Yeah.
So, well, I'm off on Friday night, but it's, but no, it's, it once again, what it goes back to, we try to work with the businesses as best we can. You know, when can we schedule inspections, things of that nature. So we work through that with them, and, you know, it just kind of, it's just that ebb and flow with what the businesses need and how we can best meet them.
Okay, thanks. Other questions, council members, or comments?
I've got a couple. Number one, do you have the resources necessary to meet mission and keep our firefighters safe? And if not, what else do you need?
So appreciate the question. I think next month we're going to have the Birdie presentation for you at the work session, and there's a lot of insightful information into that. I mean, I could go into some detail right now if you want to, but I would probably defer to maybe do that at the
We'll
work
cover that
session.
in Birdie's. I know that one's already on the docket. I'm just, a general question,
Yes,
other
sir.
than that, which we're already working, I want to make sure that you have what you need.
Right.
And to meet mission and keep our firefighters safe, and this is your chance to tell me no if you don't.
Yes, so no, we definitely have some, we have some needs. Staffing is that primary area, staffing, And when you look at that staffing model that we're at, and we've talked about that at the strategic planning meeting in December, there are some challenges there that we definitely need to look at. And then response times, so that the response issues are there and that's also going to be defined in great detail for you as well. But staffing is a primary concern.
Is the staffing issue related to resources, financial resources, or it's just tough to recruit?
It's what we've been allowed to bring on staff. So in other words, approved positions.
So you need more approved positions, is what you're saying?
Sir.
Okay, well, that's fair.
And this will be covered again in the Birdie we're talking about in a month from now, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, sir.
which we're
There's
tracking
a
that.
lot of detail that we've put, and I think it will be very clear, the data that we've been able to look at. I mean, it's just, if you just look at the call volume from 2016 to now, if you look at that call volume and you look at the staffing increase, input versus output, our output has risen considerably.
Okay, well, I look forward to that conversation.
Yes, sir.
Follow up on the same theme.
Yes, sir.
Anything keep you up at night related to your job on this?
I'm sorry, what was that last?
Related to the job, anything keeping you up? I mean, I don't need to hear about the dogs outside, but basically, stress factors, okay? Major
Yeah.
issues.
I think, once again, the biggest thing is just understanding the dynamics that are at work and the change within what we have to protect. We have a lot of hazards, and a lot of it we consider ourselves as a residential area, and we are. A vast majority of what we deal with is residential, but we have a lot of unique hazards that we have to respond to. You look at the resort area, you look at the medical facilities, you look at the incident that we just had on Friday. You had a propane delivery truck overturned. While it doesn't happen often, the challenge is when those, a lot of times people say, well, you only fight fire 3% of the time. But that 3% of the time is when you have 100% of your dollar loss, 100% of your injuries, and 100% of your potential life loss. So that incident the other day on Friday was a very unique incident that, we had to request a hazardous materials response team out of Fayetteville to help us with that. It was a team effort along with the county. But there's, those hazards exist out there, and while it might not happen frequently, we have to be ready for it. We have to prepare for it. We have to train for it. And those are the things that we really, that are the focus, because when they do happen, we have to be effective, and it's a resource game. That's what it is. It's all about resources. And while we can't have 100% of everything we need, there are some key areas that we can focus on to get us closer to where we need to be.
I've got no further questions, but Chief, thank you for what you do and all your firefighters and keeping us safe. Thank you very much.
And I appreciate y'all's support and everything that you do for us.
John?
So, understanding that you may not have the allocated positions that you'd like, I think we're fully staffed now for whatever is authorized. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, sir. So we're one position down right now. That's in the hiring queue. That position closes on February the 4th. And so once we have that, but we are one position down due to an injury. That person's on light duty, and so we're trying to get him rehabbed and get him back on the truck as fast as we can.
Situation you described with the propane truck, those are known as low frequency, high severity.
Yes, sir.
And, right, you have to train to that.
Yes, sir.
To meet or exceed that level, because you never know when it's going to happen.
That's right.
So, nothing further.
Barb? Jack?
I just had a couple questions on the recalls. Do we advise people that they are on the recall list, and so therefore they're kind of restricted as to what they can do during their off time? By that?
Yes. So on recalls, off-duty recalls are voluntary in nature. So in other words, what we do is if we have a need and we have a response. So the incident we had Friday, that was a long duration incident. We were out there for 23 hours. And so when you look at that incident, we had a recall, and we were able to get some staff back on that recall, and we didn't miss a single call during that incident because people were recalled.
Do we advise people that they are subject to recall during this period of time, and therefore they shouldn't leave the county or something to that effect?
Right.
Don't go out drinking,
Right. So if we put them on recall like that, we have to compensate them.
Okay.
If we limit your movement, we have to compensate you. Now, we have another type of, where kind of it's more along the lines of what you're asking, and that's what we call a mandatory. So unfortunately, we had to mandatory somebody the other day because of, we've got the sickness running through the department right now, and we actually had to mandatory somebody over, and he had to work an additional 40-hour shift because we were short that day. And so because of that, we had to mandatory. So those are two separate things.
Situation where you're not at work, but you're on call.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
The second question relates to useful life of equipment. I know between you and Dana, I'm sure you figured out the depreciation schedule and so forth, but do you have a good handle on the useful life of some of the equipment, or is there other equipment that appears to be depreciating faster than its financial depreciation cycle?
Right, so I can't necessarily speak to the financial depreciation of equipment. What I can speak to is we have replacement plans that are driven by a couple of different things. So, for example, the personal protective equipment, our turnout gear that we wear, our helmets that we wear, our self-contained breathing apparatus. The National Fire Protection Association has standards, and in that standard, what they state is that equipment has a useful life of 10 years. So at 10 years, we have to dispose of that gear, okay? We also have an apparatus replacement plan. So that is a formalized plan that we've had in place for many years here in Pinehurst. And that plan states at certain increments within a vehicle life. So an apparatus, so that's like the engine companies, the rescues, units like that. That usable lifespan is there, and that's also delineated in policy as well. And so that lifespan, so that's what helps us plan apparatus out, so we can plan for that. Our radios, basically, radios are one of those things. That's one thing we're going to be coming back to you on in the budget because of the technology upgrades and what we have to be able to keep up with to stay on the system we're on. We're in the middle of doing that. And then one other thing that was put in place many years ago by Chief Cole that was very forward-thinking is we try to do incremental replacement on like fire hose. So we replace our fire hose in increments so that way it's not one big purchase or a bulk purchase. Yeah. We try to limit that as much as we can to spread that out over the life of the equipment.
No? Okay. Chief, thank you very much.
Thank y'all for the opportunity. Y'all take care.
Stay safe out there.
Thank y'all.
So Councilman Morgan mentioned, what keeps him up at night. So Chief was at that propane tank turnover all night. So we appreciate him and his dedication to doing the job right.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And Mr. Mayor, so the police chief is actually ill. He came down with something this afternoon. So
we'll move it to next week. Or
yeah,
next
if
month.
you're good with that, we can put it at the next meeting.
Yes. Next meeting, we definitely need a healthy police chief. Okay, that brings us to other business. So I think I had one thing I made a note of. I don't know, was it last month or I can't remember exactly what now. We discussed about, regarding the PDO update and the focus group, adding a couple of people to that. Have we got around to doing that yet? I lost track of it.
Yeah, so we talked about adding one additional member. We have brainstormed, and we have not come up with one, but actually that might be an appropriate task for this evening. If there is anyone interested in being on the PDO rewrite update task force, or whatever we actually ended up calling it, right. We are looking for one additional member.
Okay, so we should think about it and send you a name.
If you have one, yes. Alex and I kind of came up blank.
Okay. All right, well, we'll think about that. It's good to know. Is there any particular background or type person you're looking for? Just someone who's been in the village and lives in the village?
I mean, certainly if you've had any experience in the development world or construction, that would be helpful. But we actually have that pretty well covered, so even just a general resident that willing to share their time and their thoughts would be helpful.
I'll sleep on it, get back to you. Anyone with any other items for new business? No? Dr. Morgan? John?
More a comment rather than piece of business. If we had had our first hearing today, what occurred to me as I was prepping for it, looking at the videos of the two P&Z meetings, was this issue of scale. And I raise it because in my time on historic preservation, one of the things that I found most difficult was looking at a plan on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and understanding what it was going to look like in real life. And I mention that not with specific reference to what is the plan that's been withdrawn, but if, as and when we get to Village Place, I think whatever council that is going to have to give some real thought to that, even if there is not residential property immediately adjacent. It's not easy to do. Maybe if you're a trained architect or something, maybe it's easier, but it's not easy to do. I think the other question that we're going to have to think about relative to the design is to the extent that that area is in the historic district, whether we would want whatever became developed there to look like the downtown village or something else. So I just raise those as food for thought down the road, as opposed to any other piece of business. Nothing further.
Thank you. Good thought. All righty. Hearing no other business?
I just have
Jack?
one other comment. I noted that our next council meeting on February 11th happens to be the same day as the birthday of James Walker Tufts in 1835. So I thought, I'm sure we have something planned for that. I just thought I'd tell the community that be aware that February 11th, 1835, Mr. Tufts was born, who actually created the entire village, and we have him to thank for what we have here today.
Well, great catch, and maybe you can talk to Kristen, and we can have some fireworks and
Yeah, what's your
other
favorite
items on the
cake?
website.
Ice cream?
Let's not bring a cake to the meeting, though.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we ought to bring a cake. How old will he be, or would have he been had he lived?
Subtracted 1835 from 2000.
Oh, boy. Okay. Well, all right. Well, so noted. Good catch, Jack. Anything else? All right. I'll entertain a motion for about a 10-minute adjournment.
Motion to adjourn the regular meeting.
Second.
Motion is second. So adopted. We'll meet back at 6 o'clock.